You and I both know some pretty remarkable non-humans, like RoboCop, HAL 9000, R2-D2, Baymax. But even in the best stories, like ones where robots aid in the destruction of the Death Star, the most amazing robot is never fully the same as its human companion. Maybe those robots are programmed to recognize evil. Maybe they've had enough rationality to win at chess. Maybe they learn how to imitate social behaviors like a fist bump. But a robot doesn't feel the kind of empathy that only humans feel. A robot doesn't imagine. A robot can't care. And a robot doesn't show compassion. Compassion is distinctly human. There's actually nothing in all of creation that has the same capacity to care, empathize, or imagine like a human. After all, who do you think programmed all those robots? I believe humans have a unique capacity for one reason. They were made in the image of God. And in case you haven't noticed, kids are human too. Stop for a moment and think about it. If every kid is created in the image of God, what does that mean? It literally means that every kid has a divine capacity to believe, imagine, and love. And every kid has a divine capacity to care, relate, and trust. And every kid has a divine capacity to reason, improve, and lead. Now, that's a lot of potential. Some of us have been so programmed to see what's wrong with kids and teenagers, we've forgotten to see what's right about them. It's easy to think that because they aren't old enough, smart enough, mature enough, important enough, or even spiritual enough, they can't really do anything significant. I actually think it's ironic that some non-Christian organizations understand the potential of a kid better than many churches. Just look at Disney. Churches that succeed will recognize that not only do kids have a divine capacity to do good, kids were made to do good. That's because doing good matters. At least it matters if you're human. See if this makes sense. If God is good, and God made people in His image, then people were made to do good. And by the way, that includes kids and teenagers. As we travel around and connect with churches in the United States and beyond, we hear a lot of remarkable stories about what kids and teenagers are doing in our country and around the world. When I hear about some of the good things that kids and teenagers are capable of doing, I am actually reminded of how good God is. When you remember that every kid is made in the image of God, it can change how you see them. It can also change how you see God. When you remember that every kid is made in the image of God and you give them opportunities to do good, it can actually change how they see themselves and how they see God. What if you started acting like what a kid does can actually affect what a kid believes? Okay, this may sound backwards, so let me clarify. A person's beliefs obviously influence their behavior. We seem to talk about that a lot. But I sometimes wonder if we've forgotten that practically speaking, our behaviors can also influence our beliefs. I actually think the things a person does sometimes have a transformative impact on what they believe. Think about this for a minute. Let's say you're going to teach a class on mountain climbing. You talk about climbing, you show pictures of Colorado and Mount Everest, maybe even pass around some climbing equipment for the kids to get their hands on. And if you did all of those things, but the students in your class never experienced climbing for themselves, how motivated do you think they would be to go climbing? Here's a profound question. Do you think climbers climb just because they have heard about climbing or because one day they started climbing? What made them believers in mountain climbing? When we started North Point Community Church, we decided we were not going to create programming for teenagers on Sunday morning. We didn't want them to go to a class where they would just sit and have a Bible study. Instead, we decided we would give them opportunities to serve with the adults on Sunday mornings. We wanted teenagers to serve not just because we needed their help, but because we instinctively knew it would be essential for their spiritual growth. We gave them a time of worship and teaching on their own on Sunday afternoons, but on Sunday mornings, we gave them a chance to serve alongside other students and seasoned leaders. Consider how this has worked in your own life. Was there a time when you plugged in and served? What did that do for your faith? If I had to guess, I would imagine that it affected what you believe about people and about yourself and what you think about the church and maybe even what you think about God. So if that's true for you, why wouldn't it be more true for teenagers as well? If I had to guess, I would imagine that it affected what you believe about people about yourself, what you think about the church, and maybe even what you think about God. And if that's true for you, why wouldn't it be true for teenagers as well? One of the best ways to stimulate faith is to give someone an opportunity to have a personal ministry. It's kind of like mountain climbing. If you never actually climb, you will miss the wonder of seeing the view. You will miss the discovery of personal capacity. You will miss the passion of engaging with the mountain. And if you want a kid's faith to grow significantly, give them something significant to do. It's important to understand how what a kid does relates to what they believe as a Christian. That's why we like to say doing good is a response to the gospel. It's not a substitute for the gospel. A kid's ability to do good can be a reminder of what Jesus has already done. It reinforces the power of the gospel to work in your daily life. And showing kids how to respond to the gospel by serving others makes their experience less inward and more outward. And here's something else to think about. Doing good reflects the nature of Jesus. It doesn't earn you points with God. God's love is unconditional, and your salvation is a result of His grace. And when a kid reflects on the nature of Christ, it is a reminder to them that He doesn't measure their behavior and that He loves them unconditionally. When we give kids the chance to try something new, even if they fail at first, they're seeing how God calls and builds us as believers. Here's another thing to think about. Doing good stretches your faith. It's not a replacement for faith. There's a subtle difference between putting your faith in what you can do and what God can do through you. But when kids and teenagers experience the difference, they will continue to mature in what God designed them to do. You see, faith motivates them to do good, and doing good is a reflection of their faith. Some people might be afraid of encouraging kids and teenagers to do good because they're afraid those kids and students might confuse their goodness with God's goodness. But that's circular thinking. I think you should probably be cautious about any theology that says you shouldn't help kids do good things. Why? For a lot of reasons, but here's at least one. Kids will understand a little more about God when they do something that God made them to do. That can actually be true for non-Christian kids as well. Doing good sparks the image of God in every kid. When you help a kid discover what they were made to do, you have an opportunity to introduce them to the God who made them. Here's another idea. Doing good connects every kid to a bigger story. Serving others turns one's mind and heart outward. It reminds us that this life is bigger than just our story, that we're part of a story that started before us and will continue after us. And when a kid begins to see a bigger story at work, you have an opportunity to talk about the one who's redeeming their story. So, what if your job as a leader is simply to appeal to the nature of Christ and the image of God in every kid who is searching to know God? Kids need a new kind of leader who will enlist teenagers to serve, because serving will ultimately change who they are and how they see God. And I know what you're thinking. Wait, teenagers? Why just teenagers? Shouldn't every kid serve at every phase? Sure, go ahead. Try that. Have your toddlers organize the food pantry. Ask your kindergartners to fund a missionary family. Enlist your second graders to raise awareness for sex trafficking. Okay, maybe those aren't the best ideas. Unless, of course, you have a plan B for funding that missionary family. But you're still right. Every kid at every phase should experience what God can do through their life. So maybe you should consider how to prompt preschoolers to share. Maybe you should consider how to rotate elementary kids to help each other and invite middle schoolers to serve alongside adults and to enlist high schoolers to develop a weekly personal ministry. The truth is this: the more we learn about different phases, the more we're convinced that serving becomes a bigger deal as a kid gets older. That means the impact of teenagers who serve is exponentially more profound. Brain research actually gives us some interesting insight into what happens inside a teenager's mind that makes him or her just right for serving. Researcher Ronald E. Dahl puts it this way: adolescence is a developmental period when an appetite for adventure, a predilection for risk, and a desire for novelty and thrills seem to reach naturally high levels. In other words, teenagers are experience magnets. One of the reasons some students struggle to connect with church is because we invite them to something that is static and uneventful. They never experience the intoxicating kind of faith that comes when they allow God to work through their lives. They don't have a hands-on encounter with ministry that gives them a personal sense of God's mission. They miss out on the passion that results from colliding with humanity when caring for someone in a crisis situation. Our friends at Fuller Youth Institute recently completed a comprehensive study of more than 1,000 interviews over 10,000 hours in 40 states. Their study shows one of the strongest factors in determining whether a student will stay connected to the gospel after graduating is if they were engaged in serving their churches while still a teenager. The heart gravitates to where it finds adventure and significance. So if you want to engage a teenager, give them somewhere to serve. Here's another reason to focus on teenagers. Enlisting teenagers to serve will change everyone else. Kids need to experience teenagers serving. Have you ever observed a second grader as they watch an eighth grader? Teenagers have a lot of influence. Enlisting teenagers to serve can change a lot of kids. And teenagers need to serve alongside adults. Even though they might not show it, teenagers are learning how to become adults from adults. And what they see adults do will influence them more than what they hear adults say. And you know what else? Adults need to see teenagers serving. When adults see teenagers serving, both inside and outside the church, it changes how they see teenagers. So the question is, how will you enlist teenagers to serve? What is your role in inviting someone to experience doing good? Not so they will put their trust in good, but so that they'll put their trust in God. That's when they will see how God wants to work through their life, and that's when they will begin to say, I was made for this.